Hi, Paul here. Welcome back. Today I'd like to talk about automation and how important automation really is to making your record breathe as much life and joy and abundance and all the things you would attribute to life. Those are the same emotions that you should be able to bring to your records. And if it's a heavy, dark record, aggression and hate and angst, and there's got to be tension in a record. It's got to unfold like a great screenplay. So here's what I do. Basically, and this is going to be just a basic outline of how I build automation moves into a record, when I start doing the moves, how I go from instrument to instrument, and what my cues are that I listen for. Okay, in Pro Tools, I'll describe it as if I'm in Pro Tools, but it also works on a console. For me, for years, and still I'm on an SSL when that opportunity arises. But in Pro Tools, I will have everything. All the faders are basically, there is no automation. Everything is off, and I get all the faders to go the best I can to sit overall for this song. Okay, so I'll get the drums and the bass. Usually I'll push up everything to start with. All the faders are going up. The vocal, the drums, the bass, the guitars, the strings, the horns, the percussion, the keyboards, the vibra slap. Everything is going up, and I'm going to get an overall feel for what it is that record is trying to communicate, what the sentiment is of the record, what the lyrical content is in the song, what the topic's about, and get a vibe on what it is I want to do. So I'll usually get there in about all of a mix, like within 10 minutes, I'm hearing the record. Overall, what it should be, what it can be, and I'm accumulating these ideas in my head. I will EQ and do whatever. I get the stereo bus going. I will compress. I will do whatever it is to make the record sit at the best I can. Okay, sit before I turn on automation. And when I say sit, that's kind of at a point where now I'm at a place where for me to go further to make things stand up and really speak, I've got to start doing some automation moves to get things out of the way so I have freedom to really bring the record to life. Because just being a balancer, although we are balance engineers, like they used to say in the day, you want to basically get your balance there, and that's where you're barely getting started, okay? So what I do is I get everything to sit, and then I will, usually the first ride that I do is a lead vocal, because of the slightest move in a lead vocal's volume will kind of make everything sound really right or really wrong. There's a certain relationship I feel in most modern pop records or rock records or whatever it is we're talking about. There's a certain balanced relationship between the lead vocal, the drums, and pretty much those two, maybe the bass, but pretty much the drums and the bass and everything. It's got to be, they've got to kind of move in harmony, so to speak. So I will go through and do a lead vocal ride. If the vocal really takes a lot of rides, I didn't quite get it to fit in exactly how I want it to be within the record, then I'll do one more pass, okay, on the lead vocal. I should speak about the automation modes I use. The first pass that I do, I will do an overall pass from top to bottom in absolute. Usually to save time, I just put them in red. Everything is in red. The fader's in red in Pro Tools. That's absolute mode. And I will hit the global button on the automation window selection. It's a left and right arrow, I think, and you can select whether it'll do that on stop. I usually have it so if I'll hit the button, the DAW or tape will still be rolling, and as soon as I hit stop, it will write those levels from the very start of the session to the very end of the session. Once I do that absolute pass, I can put the lead vocal in absolute, so it's live again. That fader, only that fader is red in absolute, and I'll do my rides. Okay, let's say I want to ride it in the little things in the verses and in the chorus. Okay, I go through the whole track. All right, and what I do is I just wind back. Let's say I miss something that I want to get. I'll just wind back 2 seconds. The fader light turns off, so it's actually playing the trim value that I already wrote. Once I punch in on the fader automation button, it'll go red again because I'm in absolute mode. So I'll build basically the perfect pass of that lead vocal. I'll whine, I'll do my rides. I go, oh, I didn't like that. Back up 2 seconds, punch in, do some more rides. It'll go, and I'll work my way back and forth, or sometimes all the way through, without switching modes. I'm in absolute, and now I've reached the very end of the song. Okay? Now I want to do a little more fine tuning on the lead vocal that I just wrote. And more specifically, what I do is I put it in trim latch, which means I can ride along on the fader, and let's say I want to bring the choruses overall. I want it to be more inside the track on the choruses, and I'll just bring it down a little bit. Now it's still going to play back underneath the layer I'm currently writing. It's still going to play back all the little rides that I did in absolute mode, but I can ride on top of those rides, those fader moves. So I'm writing fader moves on top of pre-existing fader moves. But let's say I make a move and I don't like what I did. I can just wind back again in trim mode, punch in, or as soon as I touch the fader, it'll start riding again. And there's a red line on the actual edit window that I can watch to see how far I got. I can wind back, and I also use something called rollback join, which I'll speak about in another video. But basically, I can roll back, and as soon as I touch the fader, it will start riding on top of those rides. Now, when I'm in trim latch mode, that fader will turn yellow. That also tells me that I'm in trim latch mode. It's a really cool mode that I like to work in. Trim latch mode allows me to build the ultimate pass of automation, go back, and anything I want to grab, I can just ride. So let's say I do rides on guitars and I want a cha-cha-chum before the actual chorus, say. Okay, so I go dun 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 cha-cha-chum dun dun dun, and I think, oh, that was cool. And I go back, and later I decide that they're not quite loud enough. In trim latch, what I'll do is I'll put those faders at 0. That's where they land, is all across at 0. So I know that that's basically my starting point, my safe ground that has my absolute level that I love, which could be down at -12, but the fader's sitting at 0. It'll also be playing back all the little rides that I did on top of that absolute mode in trim latch mode. So let's say the next pass comes along and I want those cha-cha-chum to be more cha-cha-chum. I'm still going to hear what I did, but I want more. So instead of coming up 3 dB, maybe I'll go up for a dB and a half or 2 more dB more. And I go cha-cha-chum, just a little ride. Now I'm actually hearing 5 or 6 dB on that cha-cha-chum, right? So if I overshoot it, all I have to do is wind back, and as soon as I touch the fader in rollback join, it's like my new attempt didn't exist. So it's a really great way to take chances and go for stuff without messing anything up. That's why I don't tend to like to work in touch mode, because when I hit touch mode, if I touch it, I can't really undo what I touched. There is a touch latch mode, but it gets kind of tricky, and I really try to keep things as simple as possible. Okay, so anyway, you can check that out. Use trim latch mode after you do your first pass or first couple passes, and I think it will allow you to be much more comfortable trying things, because let's say you do a swell on something or you want to do a little ride and you don't like what it did, you can go back and just touch the faders, and what you just did 3 seconds later will be wiped out like it didn't even happen. So it allows you to be really bold and really experimental. Plus, you know that to come back to home, so to speak, to your starting point, even though you've got rides and the fader's actually doing this, as long as you're in trim latch, you can bring that right down to zero and you're safe again. You're back to where you were. Some people use preview modes and all this other stuff. To me, I just don't get involved in any of that stuff. I use Pro Tools and the automation as simply as I can. I like things simple and fast. And whatever gets me to the finish line as fast as possible and allows me the freedom to try things and to mess up. I want the freedom to be able to mess up at no cost. And that's what Trim Latch affords me, is the freedom to go for it without any fear. Because when you mix in fear and you go like, I don't want to touch that, I don't want to do this, you're basically, you're playing it safe and you're never gonna get that magic. You're never gonna get the goods that make you like, wow, this is amazing. I love this. Now, in Trim Latch, you can put everything on the whole record in Trim Latch right across the entire Pro Tools session, or you can do it one fader at a time. Once I get the vocal written and the record sitting there, I may go, this is a piano song. I really want to do a piano ride. Or I'll do the piano and I'll just work my way down the whole track. I'll wind back, I'll grab it. Oh, I messed that up. Let me do that. No, I want that to be softer. I'll wind back and I'll build the perfect take. Then I'll jump into the guitars. Then I'll do the solo. Then I'll get the background vocals in there, right? And everything's great. Now I've done all these rides, right? I've done the bass. When I do bass, a lot of times I'll mix the bass in listening in mono. There's something about the bass for me that when I listen in mono, maybe it has to do with the buildup of bottom end, maybe so I'm not confused by the bottom end on other guitars or subsonic synths or drum sounds or, bass drums and all that, which allows me to hear the bass more accurately and to get my rides, any little run or scale or flurry or slide off or any of that stuff. It just is really nice to do it for me in mono. The same with a vocal. You can really make writing vocals a lot easier and faster with less guesswork if you mix in mono. And by the way, when I come out of every ride, let's say I go to the end, I will have it in my preferences. So when I leave that mode and go to just read, I'll take it out of trim, I'll take it out of latch. When I do that, it will automatically commit those moves to that automation rail, so to speak, to that track. Okay? So let's say all the lights are normal green, everything has been trimmed, I'm no longer in latch mode, right? Now what I want to do is I feel like I want some overall finessing of the mix, right? Let's say the bass guitar I want to have louder, and the snare drum, I want to bring it down, but I want to add more zing or zip, maybe some 15K sparkle to it, or I want more 1K fundamental to it. I'm not sure what I want to do, but what I'll do is I'll go toward the front of the song, maybe the verse area, maybe the chorus, and I will put everything there is in trim latch. Again, all the faders are yellow. Now what I'll do is I'll mess around with fader levels and EQ, possibly compression, and I'll say the lead vocal, I want it up a little bit and I want it a little less 3K. I want the presence down a little bit, but I want more of the volume up. Say the bass guitar, I want up, but I want to take off some of the bottom end. And I'll work through and I'll just sit back and casually tweak. This comes up, this comes down, this gets a little less compression, this gets more compression while I'm messing with those, right? Now I'm really fine-tuning it. I'm getting in the crosshairs. I'm really, really focusing on bringing it in to something that's like undeniably even better than what I already loved. At the end of it, whenever you touch a fader, those faders I think turn red. So I don't even worry about that. Before I back up, because I'll lose those moves, it'll jump back to where it was, or I don't know what it'll do, whatever. I go toward the end of the song and I will hit that left and right global thing, right? That will write whatever final, where I was at the very end of that last pass, at that, or where I was almost at the end of the song, that will write that level to the front and to the back the same, keeping all the underlying trim rides that I've done for many, many passes over and over before that. It will keep that, right? Now I go toward the front of the song, or the front of the song. Everything again is in latch trim. I've turned it off, the fader, to read. Now I've re-engaged everything to latch trim. Now I can hit play and do the same thing again. I can tweak. It's like, oh, I really want the background vocals to be higher overall. I want this down, I want that up, I want this down, I want this brighter, I want this less present, I want this more present, I want this thicker, and I keep tweaking and I hit the global thing. That way, I'm getting it to a point that's undeniable, that really, really excites me. Pulling out little slivers of equalization, peaking little bumps of equalization and stuff just to get it better. Now that I'm at a place where I feel the mix is really happening, I'll probably take a break for a while. Then I'll come back. Now I'll really focus even again. What kind of sounds can I get? Can I do vocal throws, like using automation to do a vocal throw? Can I do a drop on something? Can I do an effect on this using automation? All kinds of stuff. I'll also get in there, and on the lead vocal, whatever the final lead vocal aux or whatever it is, the final thing that my effects are being sent from and whatever else I'm being sent from, I will, a lot of times, sometimes earlier in the mix too, I will have an equalizer that I will automate, because a lot of vocals, even if they're recorded great, you'll find that, oh, that one word or that one line is boomy, or that needs more presence, or that one line is really shrill. And I will automate, let's say, a metric halo channel strip, pick some frequencies. I guess it has 6 bands, so I can pick whatever frequencies I want, and I can just, in touch mode, switch the automation mode from fader and mute mode to take those out of the automation window and select plugin. Okay, so on that particular plugin, there's a quick keystroke on that, is you can hold down, I think it's Control and Option and the Command button together, and whatever EQ knob you hit, a drop window will show up to the side of it and say Enable Automation for that parameter. And I'll go in and I'll automate, I'll make live whatever faders I think I've got to ride the EQ to correct any sort of equalization on the lead vocal that I don't like. Or let's say there's a certain word on something, or let's say I want to accentuate a T on a word, or let's say there's an F that's being buried and it's really important to the intelligibility of the lyric. I will make sure to go in there and just gun the equalizer in automation. So at the end of the day, I'll have tons of little EQ rides on the lead vocal, so that lead vocal can be as great as possible. And I'll do it on other instruments as well. It's really important to have your lead vocal really intelligible, and then you can blur it out as much as you want or make it as crystal clear as you want, whatever the record calls for. Usually when I'm mixing, I like things to be clear and clean, but also dirty and not clean at all. I want it so that things blend well together. But if you want to pick out any particular instrument, especially in a dense mix, that you can either listen to a record from afar and go, yeah, that's cool, it feels really good. But if you want to really hone in on this little tiny muted guitar thing, you should be able to pick it out. So that's another thing I use mono for. Just as a side note, I use mono not only to make sure that all the frequencies and all the instruments are dovetailed and chiseled so I can hear everything. I also want to hear how much tension and blur and fighting there is among frequencies and instruments, because there's an element to that that I want in most records. I don't want everything clear. That to me is two-dimensional. There's no depth to it, and you can't really listen to it. When things are too clean, it annoys me. It just doesn't sound good. Not that it sounds digital, it just sounds too disjointed. It doesn't have a vibe. It doesn't have the glue. It doesn't have the transformers. It doesn't have that Neve thing. It doesn't feel right to me. So that's another topic, though. So at the end of it all, don't forget about your stereo bus automation. Okay, if you have a stereo bus fader on your workstation, jump into the automation mode on that. Okay, not if you have a stereo bus fader. You have a stereo bus fader. Make sure to do little rides. You might find that the verse is better if it's down a dB, and when the chorus hits or the B section, come up 0.3 of a dB on the B section, and when the chorus hits, sometimes just pushing it up a dB or a dB and a half or something on the chorus can really add excitement and allows the chorus to function as a chorus and really pay off. Really makes the hook pop, so to speak. So be sure to automate all these faders. You can automate equalization. You can do all this stuff. Automate throws into delays and reverbs, and hopefully this will give you a little bit of insight on how I approach my automating, and hope it was helpful. Thanks for checking it out. Best success with all your automation rides. And until the next time, I'll talk to you later. Cheers.